Thomas sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the empty chair across from him. The morning sunlight streamed through the window, lighting up the untouched teacup he still set out for Claire each day. 6 months had passed since his wife died, but the pain felt as fresh as ever. Their cottage by the sea, once filled with laughter and love, now echoed with silence. Thomas ran his fingers through his graying hair and sighed. He had to get ready for work. The local high school where he taught history wouldn't wait, even if his heart wasn't in it anymore. "Dad? Are you ready?" Emma appeared in the doorway, school bag over her shoulder. At 15, she was the spitting image of her mother, the same warm eyes, the same gentle smile that rarely appeared these days. "Yes, love. Just finishing my tea." Thomas forced himself to stand, gathering his teaching materials. The drive to school was quiet, as it always was now. Thomas and Emma used to chat about everything during these morning rides. Claire's absence had created a gap neither knew how to bridge. At school, Thomas moved through his lessons like a man sleepwalking. His students noticed. Once the most popular teacher in school, known for bringing history to life with exciting stories, he now simply read from textbooks in a flat voice. "Mr. Wilson?" A student raised her hand during class. "Are you feeling all right?" Thomas paused, chalk in hand. "Yes, Beth. I'm fine." Now, where were we? The Treaty of Versailles. That afternoon, Headmaster Roberts called Thomas into his office. The older man looked at Thomas with concern in his eyes. "Thomas, the students miss your enthusiasm. They miss you. We all understand you're going through a difficult time, but..." "I'm doing my job," Thomas cut in. "Teaching isn't just about covering material. It's about connection." The headmaster's voice was kind but firm. "The students need more than information. They need your heart back in the classroom." Thomas nodded politely and left, but the words stung because they were true. He wasn't really teaching anymore. He wasn't really living either. At home, Thomas found Emma sitting on the porch swing that Claire had loved. She was sketching in her notebook, another trait she'd inherited from her mother. Claire had been an artist whose paintings still hung throughout their home. "Homework?" Thomas asked, sitting beside her. Emma shook her head. "Just drawing." Thomas peeked at her sketchbook. It showed their family, complete, standing on the beach. Beneath it, Emma had written, "I miss when Dad smiled." His heart squeezed painfully in his chest. He wasn't just failing as a teacher, he was failing his daughter too. That evening, after a quiet dinner of reheated soup, Thomas washed the dishes while Emma did her homework at the table. The phone rang, breaking the silence. "Hello?" Thomas answered. "Thomas, it's Margaret Baker." The elderly woman had been Claire's closest friend in the village. "I was wondering if you were planning to help with the community garden this year." "Planting starts next weekend." The community garden had been Claire's project. After her diagnosis, when she knew she wouldn't see another summer, the whole village had rallied to help maintain it. "I don't think I can, Margaret." His voice cracked. "I understand, dear. But the offer stands if you change your mind. Emma would be welcome too." After hanging up, Thomas noticed Emma watching him. "Was that Mrs. Baker about Mum's garden?" she asked. Thomas nodded. "We should go," Emma said softly. "Mum wouldn't want her flowers to die too." That night, unable to sleep, Thomas found himself in Claire's studio for the first time since she passed. Her half-finished paintings stood like silent witnesses to a life cut short. On her desk lay her journal. With trembling hands, he opened it to her final entries. "My greatest fear isn't dying," Claire had written. "It's that my loves will stop living because I did." Thomas sank to the floor, tears streaming down his face. Claire had always understood him better than he understood himself. He was doing exactly what she'd feared, existing but not living. As dawn broke, Thomas made a decision. He couldn't bring Claire back, but perhaps he could honor her by finding a way to truly live again, for Emma, for himself, and for the memory of the woman they both loved so dearly. The END Thomas drove home from school, the headmaster's words still ringing in his ears. The students need your heart back in the classroom. How could he give what he no longer had? His heart felt like an empty shell since Claire died. He pulled into their driveway and sat in the car for a moment. The garden was overgrown now. Claire had always tended it with loving care, planting flowers that bloomed from early spring until late autumn. Now weeds choked the flower beds, and the rose bushes needed pruning badly. Inside the house, he found Emma sitting on the porch swing that Claire had loved. She slowly pushed back and forth with one foot, her schoolbooks untouched beside her. "I thought we might order pizza tonight," Thomas said, settling beside her on the swing. Emma shrugged. "Whatever you want." The silence stretched between them like a deep canyon. Thomas wanted to reach across it but didn't know how. "Mrs. Baker asked about you in the shop today," Emma finally said. "She wants to know if you'll still help with the community garden this year." Thomas stared out at their neglected yard. The community garden had been Claire's pride and joy. She had started it 5 years ago on an empty lot in the village center. Now it provided fresh vegetables for the local food bank and beautiful flowers for the village streets. "I don't think I can," Thomas whispered. "Mom would want you to," Emma said quietly, her voice small but firm. That night, Thomas couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned, Claire's absence a physical ache beside him. Finally, he got up and wandered the dark house. His feet carried him to Claire's studio. The door had remained closed since her death. Taking a deep breath, Thomas turned the handle and stepped inside. The room smelled faintly of paint and Claire's lavender perfume. Moonlight spilled through the windows, illuminating her easel with its half-finished painting of their beach. Her brushes stood in jars, waiting for hands that would never hold them again. On her desk lay her leather-bound journal. Thomas had never read it while she was alive, respecting her privacy. But now, he picked it up, needing to feel close to her somehow. He opened to her final entries, written in the hospital during her last weeks. "Thomas still believes in miracles," she had written. "I see it in his eyes each time he visits. But I've made my peace with leaving. My only fear now isn't dying, it's that my loves will stop living because I did. I need them to understand that the best way to keep me alive is to live fully themselves." Thomas sat heavily on Claire's painting stool, tears flowing freely down his face. He had failed her. Instead of keeping her memory alive through living, he had buried himself alongside her. The next morning, Thomas made breakfast for the first time in months. Usually, Emma fixed her own cereal or toast before school. But today, Thomas got up early and prepared scrambled eggs and bacon, just as Claire used to do. Emma entered the kitchen and stopped short, surprised by the sight and smell of a proper breakfast. "You cooked," she said, her voice tinged with wonder. "Thought we might try something different today." Thomas set a plate in front of her. They ate in silence, but it felt less heavy than before. As Emma gathered her school things, Thomas cleared his throat. "I've been thinking about the community garden." Emma looked up, her expression cautious. "Maybe we could go on Saturday, see what needs doing," he continued. "Your mother wouldn't want her flowers to die." For the first time in months, Emma's face softened. "Really?" Thomas nodded. "Really?" At school that day, Thomas pulled out his old teaching notes, the ones from before when teaching had been a joy, not just a job. His students noticed the difference immediately when he put away the textbook and began telling stories about ancient Rome as if he'd walked the streets himself. Beth, the student who had asked if he was all right the day before, smiled at him from the front row. "Welcome back, Mr. Wilson," she whispered. That evening, Thomas found himself standing in their neglected garden. He knelt and pulled a few weeds from around Claire's favorite rosebush. The thorns scratched his unpracticed hands, drawing tiny beads of blood. The pain felt right somehow, a reminder that he was still alive, still capable of feeling. From the porch, Emma watched her father working in the garden. After a moment, she set down her sketchbook and joined him, kneeling in the dirt beside him without a word. Together, they cleared a small patch around Claire's roses. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. The END Saturday morning dawned clear and bright. Thomas woke feeling nervous but determined. Today, he and Emma would visit the community garden for the first time since Claire died. "Are you ready?" he asked Emma over breakfast. She nodded, pushing her cereal around in her bowl. "Do you think it will look the same?" Thomas considered this. "I don't know. Gardens change." They drove to the village center in silence, both lost in memories of previous visits when Claire had led the way, her gardening gloves already on and her smile wide with excitement. The community garden sat behind the old village hall. As they approached, Thomas saw it was overgrown in places but not abandoned. Other villagers had kept it going, though perhaps not with Claire's expert touch. Mrs. Baker was already there, her gray hair tucked under a wide-brimmed hat. She looked up as they entered through the wooden gate and her face broke into a surprised smile. "Well, well. The Wilsons have returned," she exclaimed, pulling them both into a hug that smelled of lavender and soil. "I'm so glad you came." Other villagers soon appeared, Jack from the bakery carrying coffee for everyone, the Martin family with their young twins, and Oliver who ran the local pub. They had all known Claire. They had all mourned her. But they were still here, tending what she had started. "We've kept her rose section going," Mrs. Baker explained, leading them to a corner of the garden where Claire's prize roses grew. "But nobody has your touch with them, Thomas." Thomas had forgotten that. Before Claire got sick, he had been the rose expert in their house. Claire had been hopeless with roses but brilliant with vegetables and wildflowers. Somehow, in his grief, he had forgotten his own connection to the garden. He knelt by the rose bushes, examining them with a critical eye. "They need pruning," he said, reaching for the garden shears Mrs. Baker offered. Emma wandered over to the vegetable plots, where the Martin twins were digging in the dirt. "Want to help plant tomatoes?" Mrs. Martin asked her. Emma nodded shyly and joined them. Thomas worked silently at first, cutting back the overgrown roses. His hands remembered what to do even as his heart ached with each familiar motion. But gradually, the physical work soothed him. The sun warmed his back, and the earth smelled rich and alive. "Dad, look!" Emma called after a while. She stood by the stone bench where Claire used to rest when she needed a break. She was pointing at something carved into the seat. Thomas walked over and saw it, Claire's initials surrounded by a heart, with the words "always growing" beneath. "We did that last autumn," Oliver explained quietly, coming to stand beside them. "Thought you both should have a place to feel her here." Thomas ran his fingers over the carving. Claire had always said that gardens, like grief, required patience and care to transform into something beautiful. "Thank you," he whispered. As the morning wore on, Thomas found himself working alongside the others, giving advice on plant spacing and soil conditions. He had forgotten how much he knew, how much Claire had taught him, and how much he had taught her. Near lunchtime, Jack returned with fresh bread and cheese from his bakery. Everyone gathered around the picnic table in the center of the garden. "A toast," Mrs. Baker said, raising her water bottle. "To Claire, whose garden continues to grow." "To Claire," everyone echoed. Emma looked at Thomas, her eyes shining with unshed tears. But for the first time, they weren't just tears of sadness. There was something else there. Pride, perhaps, or the beginning of healing. After lunch, Thomas and Emma worked side by side, planting new seeds in the spaces where old growth had died. Thomas showed Emma how to dig the holes to the right depth and how to water the seeds gently. "Mom would be happy we're here," Emma said as they worked. "Yes," Thomas agreed. "She would." As the afternoon sun began to lower in the sky, Thomas looked around the garden. It was still far from perfect. Weeds remained in many places, and some plants needed more care than they had received. But it was alive, growing, and changing, just as he and Emma needed to be. "Same time next week?" Mrs. Baker asked as they were packing up their tools. Thomas looked at Emma, who nodded eagerly. "Yes," he said. "We'll be here." They walked back to their car with dirt under their fingernails and the sun on their faces. For the first time in months, Thomas felt a tiny sprout of hope taking root in his heart. The END the following week passed differently than the many before it. Thomas found himself looking forward to things, his classes, the evening meals with Emma, and especially their return to the community garden. He started to pay attention to small details again, the way the light changed through the kitchen windows, the sound of birds in the morning, the new drawings Emma left on the refrigerator. One evening, Emma appeared in the living room holding a weathered envelope. "I found this," she said, her voice quiet. It was in Mom's art cabinet behind her paints. Thomas recognized Claire's handwriting immediately, for "When I'm gone" was written across the front. "Where did you find it?" he asked, his heart beating faster. "I was looking for her good brushes," Emma explained. "I thought maybe I could use them." She handed him the envelope. "I didn't open it. It's for both of us." With shaking hands, Thomas opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a list titled "Things to Do When I Can't." 20 items, simple yet meaningful, filled the page. 1. Dance in the rain. 2. Eat ice cream for breakfast. 3. Watch the sunrise from Beacon Hill. 4. Teach Emma to drive on country roads. 5. Plant wildflowers where only you will find them. The list continued, each item a small but precious gift from Claire. Thomas looked up at his daughter, seeing a reflection of his own emotions, grief mixed with wonder and a spark of something like excitement. "She made this for us," he said. "Can we do them?" Emma asked. "All of them?" Thomas nodded, a lump in his throat making it hard to speak. "Yes," he finally managed. "We can start tomorrow." The next morning was Saturday. Thomas woke early and went to the kitchen. He took out bowls, spoons, and every flavor of ice cream they had in the freezer. When Emma came downstairs in her pajamas, she stopped and stared. "Ice cream for breakfast," Thomas explained. Number 2 on the list. Emma's face broke into a genuine smile, the first real smile he had seen in months. They sat together at the table, eating ice cream and laughing at the strangeness of it all. "Mom would love this," Emma said, digging into her chocolate chip. "She would," Thomas agreed. "She always said rules were meant to be broken sometimes." The following weekend, they tackled another item: have a picnic in the living room. They pushed back the furniture, spread a blanket on the floor, and ate sandwiches while sharing memories of Claire. Emma laughed when Thomas told the story of how Claire had once gotten them hopelessly lost on a hiking trip. "She was always terrible with maps," Emma said, wiping tears of laughter from her eyes. "Absolutely hopeless," Thomas agreed. "But she never worried about it. She always said being lost just meant finding new places." After the picnic, they drove to the coast and collected seashells, another item on Claire's list. With each completed task, something shifted between them. Words came easier. Silences grew comfortable rather than strained. At school, Thomas's students noticed the change in him. His lessons became lively again, full of the stories and enthusiasm that had once made him their favorite teacher. "You seem different, Mr. Wilson," Beth said after class one day. "Do I?" Thomas asked. "Happier," she replied simply. Thomas thought about this as he drove home. Was he happier? Not completely, the pain of losing Claire would always be there. But something had changed. He was living again, not just existing. One night, Thomas found Emma at the kitchen table, Claire's list before her. She was writing on it with her own pen. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Adding to it," Emma replied. She had written, 21. Plant sunflowers along the garden fence, and 22. Paint Dad's portrait. Thomas smiled. "She'd like your additions." Emma nodded. I think she knew we'd need a map to find our way back to living. That Sunday, they went to the community garden again. This time, Thomas brought Claire's list. "We'd like to plant sunflowers along the fence," he told Mrs. Baker. "Emma added it to Claire's list for us." Mrs. Baker's eyes filled with tears. What a wonderful idea. Claire always loved sunflowers. Together, Thomas and Emma prepared the soil and planted the seeds along the garden fence. The other villagers joined in, turning it into a community project. As they worked, Thomas realized that Claire's list wasn't just helping him and Emma, it was healing something in the whole village. That evening, as they drove home dirty and tired, Emma said, "I'm going to start painting your portrait tomorrow, Dad." "Oh?" Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Why's that?" "Because Mom would want me to capture you now," Emma said. "Now that you're coming back to life." The 6 months had passed since Thomas found Claire's list. The cottage by the sea no longer felt empty. Life had returned, bringing with it both tears and laughter. Thomas stood in front of his history class, telling the story of ancient Rome with such passion that even the sleepiest students sat up straight. His hands moved through the air as he described the fall of the empire, his voice rising and falling like he was there when it happened. "Mr. Wilson," a student asked after class, "how do you make history feel so alive?" Thomas smiled. "Because history isn't just about the past. It's about people who lived and loved and lost, just like us." At home, Emma's artwork covered the refrigerator, the walls, and even some of the ceiling in her bedroom. Her drawings weren't just memories of what was lost anymore, but visions of what remained and what could be. She had joined the school art club and was helping younger students discover their creativity. Thomas walked into the kitchen to find Emma checking Claire's list, which now hung framed on the wall. "Just one left," she said, pointing to the final unchecked item, "watch the sunrise from Beacon Hill." Thomas nodded. "I was thinking we could do it this weekend. Saturday is the anniversary." They both knew what he meant. 1 year since Claire had left them. But now the date didn't feel like only an ending. It also marked how far they had come. That Friday evening, Thomas made phone calls. On Saturday morning, long before dawn, he and Emma packed a basket with thermoses of hot chocolate, blankets, and Claire's favorite cinnamon rolls from Jack's Bakery. They drove in darkness to the base of Beacon Hill, the highest point in their village. As they got out of the car, Thomas was pleased to see other cars already parked there. "Who else is coming?" Emma asked, noticing the vehicles. "You'll see," Thomas replied. They climbed in silence, their path lit by the beam of their flashlights. The hill wasn't steep, but the trail wound through trees before opening to the summit. As they walked, other lights joined them on the path. Mrs. Baker appeared, breathing heavily but smiling. Oliver came next, carrying extra blankets. The Martins followed with their twins, who whispered excitedly about staying up all night. Jack arrived with fresh pastries, the smell making everyone's stomach growl. By the time they reached the top of the hill, 15 people from the village had joined them, all people who had loved Claire, all people who had helped Thomas and Emma find their way back to living. They spread blankets on the ground. The eastern sky was still dark, but a faint lightening at the edge promised the coming dawn. Thomas and Emma sat together on a large blanket, surrounded by their community. "Your mom and I came here on our first date," Thomas told Emma. "Did you know that?" Emma shook her head. "It was her idea. She said you could see forever from up here." Thomas looked around at the dark landscape. She was right. As they waited for the sun, people shared stories about Claire, her kindness, her terrible singing voice, her habit of always being late. They laughed and cried together under the fading stars. "Look," one of the Martin twins whispered as the first golden light appeared at the horizon. Everyone fell silent. The sky began to change color, first gray, then pink, then a brilliant gold that spread across the clouds. Light spilled over the land, touching the village below, the distant sea, and their faces turned east. Thomas felt Emma's hand slip into his. He squeezed it gently. "She's here, isn't she?" Emma whispered. "Yes," Thomas said. "In the light. In us." As the sun cleared the horizon, painting the world in gentle warmth, Thomas felt Claire's presence not as an absence but as the foundation upon which they had built their new life. He understood now what she had wanted them to see. That grief wasn't just about enduring darkness, but about finding the courage to witness the light that always follows. The list was complete now, but Thomas knew their journey wasn't over. There would be hard days still, moments when the loss felt fresh again. But they would face those days together, with the strength they had found and the community that held them. After the sun was fully up, bathing them all in morning light, the group began to pack up their things. Mrs. Baker hugged Thomas and Emma. "Claire would be proud," she said. "Of both of you." As they walked down the hill, the new day bright around them, Emma said, "I think we should start a new list." "What kind of list?" Thomas asked. "Things to do because we can," Emma replied. "I think Mom would like that." Thomas smiled, his heart full. "Yes," he said. "She absolutely would." The end.